to accepting certain things in version 1 with certain amount of problems, and then still carrying on. And I think all these things is what is getting now addressed by the DAP 2026, where we are trying that the experimentation becomes, I would say, a main area in terms of working, creating IPs with some of these startups and MSMEs who are sitting here or otherwise. That how do we create IPs with innovation, small IPs, where the technology denial regime, particularly in the defense sector, can be circumvented. And I think that is going to be a challenge, because there is a lack of skill, and that lack of skill, Mr. Ranade talked about that. While we say that there is a lot of promise, while we say that the startup ecosystem is very well established, while we say the academia is doing well, but this connect of the academia to from the lab model to a prototype, and then industry taking on an innovator in between somewhere, I think that this entire chain is yet to mature. But the gentleman sitting on the left will tell you that a lot is happening, and a lot is being tried by the armed forces to make this triad of industry, academia, armed forces work with innovation in its center. And I think it's not far when the skill set which is required for certain innovations will develop. And the reason why it is not developed is that today in the academic world, there is not a single program which is a defense-oriented program. You don't have a MTech by an IIT which is on let's say, a seeker technology, or let us say a tank engine technology. Why it was not there is because there was no financial model to it. There was no industry possibly taking them. Now with the private industry coming up, a lot of jobs being created by these majors in the private industry, I think the academia model of having specific courses, specific programs which are curated for the defense technology, thereby creating that workforce and the skill set which is required for innovation and which is required to match up this technology, a challenge which is there in front of us. I think it's a matter of time. Most countries, particularly in the West, have taken 20, 25, 30 years of research. And I again go back to one of the panelists in the last panel talking about the amount of money which you have to put into the R&D. The percentage of your GDP which has to go into the R&D, and the percentage of your turnovers, both public and private, in this country in terms of defense technology going back into the R&D is the key. Because if it does not, if it does not do that, if we don't do that today, the ability to match up to the technology changes, particularly in the defense field, is going to be extremely difficult. And therefore, academia, industry, startup ecosystem, all have to work in unison to ensure that tomorrow's war, we are well prepared.
Thank you, sir. That's a very, very detailed answer. We'll move to General Mann now. Sir, 3 questions basically. How do you prevent defense innovation from becoming performative rather than operationally meaningful? How do you create urgency within systems that are structurally designed to minimize risk? And lastly, how do you prevent innovation efforts from becoming fragmented islands across services, startups, academia? Pretty much, what General Gaur just mentioned now. And how do we build that talent pool for the industry?
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, my gratitude to Klaus for giving me an opportunity in this. And secondly, I think somehow, it is by default or so that invariably I'll end up getting multiple questions being put across in one go only. So that's what happened even when I went for some of my UN interviews also. As we started with, there are 4 questions for you. Generally, it is 1 question. I said, there are 4 questions for you. And exactly that is what is happening today also. But nevertheless, okay, I'll take them one by one. I'll forget those. So I'll just start with the first one. So first one is basically what you are implying is that how is it that the innovation does not become just only demonstrative, but it is actually operationally aligned. Okay. You see, if we see, say till about 8 to 10 years back, the procurements were more of vendor push rather than the user pull. It was whatever somebody was offering, and then you say, it's okay, yes, then let's take it, rather than the user pull. But now, because of this entire focus on Atmanirbharta, the latest government policies, so many enabling provisions in that, the ecosystem is really coming up. And industry is coming up into defense, especially the startups and MSMEs, growing exponentially in thousands today. So therefore, this question actually becomes very important now today, where every startup wants to do some innovation and come up with something, whether it is actually of operational use to us or not. And let me tell you, this is a live, a dilemma for us, which we face every day and whole day, because the way when we interact with the entire ecosystem. So, but then over the years, in about last 5-6 years, we've been able to evolve some very good mechanisms and processes, procedures for this, so that we obviate this kind of thing happening. I'll just go over them. Now, the first thing is user pull. Now, how do we create that user pull? So that is by virtue of giving our visibility to our requirements. And how we are doing that is in terms of publishing compendium of problem definition statements. And then taking them forward, we're getting solutions. Just to quote some figures, the last one which we released during Aero India 25, there are 82 problem statements in that. We received responses for 79 of them. For 3, we did not receive any response. And total of 794, 25% from academia, balance from the industry. So that is how we are getting good number of responses. And then we are taking them forward as R&D, D&D projects and all. Already almost about 40% of them we have initiated as various R&D, D&D projects also in that. And this CPDS is, while one which I mentioned about is here at the Army headquarters level, which is applicable pan-Army. Apart from this, like say during NORTEC, there's another CPDS released on terrain and operational area specific combined by Northern and Central Command, which again consists of 87 problem statements. Then last year we had released in September compendium of technological challenges. They were looking at little bit futuristic technologies. Then of course there is TPCR available online. Then apart from that, we are launching challenges for IDEX and all. The last one we had launched a total of 34 challenges, 8 in Aditi and 26 in DISC. And again, this time to our surprise, we are overwhelmed. For 34, we have received as many as 2,000 responses. So that is the kind of that participation which is happening. But now it becomes that much difficult for us to weed away and finally select that one DA, only 34 out of 2,000. So, but then that is okay. And apart from this, so that is how we are giving visibility to our requirements, and so that the industry, academia, they align themselves to our requirements and develop that way. But apart from that, we receive at least about 10 to 15 proposals every week from the industry, from startups and academia. That is minimum. At times, even it is more also. So we go through a process of, first being analyzed within ADB by our subject matter experts. Now, what are the outcomes of that analysis? Something is that, yes, it is something which is meeting our requirement, but not developed as yet. Maybe an idea, maybe something good. So then again, we interact with them further, guide them in case it is required to be developed, which route to follow, and what exactly our requirements are, how it can be customized for our requirement. Then other one can be something which is already available, and there are so many other people also providing it. There may be some ongoing development case or a procurement case. Accordingly, we guide them to participate in those. And in some cases where they even have, say, a product ready, or they're ready to offer it for NCNC demo in due course of time, we do accept that and then send it for that NCNC demo to the envisaged operational area of employment. Now, the advantage of that is what? Advantage is that that startup or that industry gets to know by actually deploying it on ground, whether it is actually performing the way they were expecting it or not. Secondly, our troops on ground are able to give the feedback that yes, whether this product is something required by us or not, or what can be the further product improvements in that, which will actually make it more acceptable to us. So that's an iterative process which it goes through. Apart from this, there are, say, the other, this thing like open challenges also, we receive proposals, go to about 250 to 300 under IDEX every 3 to 4 months. So, but then this is the process. And in that, the conversion rate in open challenges is, I'll say about conversion, when I say means, how many of them actually get converted into a developmental project is about 3 to 5% in that. So there is a process in place wherein we are avoiding that and aligning actually those innovations to our operational requirements. And finally, when it comes to procurement, no procurement takes place without the endorsement by Military Operations Directorate. So automatically then they also get aligned to that. So that is how this entire process of aligning the thing and to our operational requirements is. Second question.
How do you create urgency within systems that are structurally designed to minimize risk?
Okay. Again, something which we keep grappling every day. Okay. Now, if we say, I'm saying, go back a little bit, how these procurement procedures have evolved. They evolved based on some, baggage which we carried of a few scams and all, because of which became so tight, and it is that risk averseness is something which is getting addressed, which is troubling us in that. But then, as a result of that, the entire process is focused on with the fear of, I'll say the failure of procurement. Whereas today what is required is the failure of capability. Just now, relating to the previous question which you asked to DGCD, that the way the technology is developing so fast, the procurement cycle has to keep match with it.
Yes.
So therefore, from that point of view, the focus has to be now on the fear of that capability getting developed or not. Are we getting that capability within the acceptable time or not? So now for this, what is required to be done? We see, I'll say that the government has put in many processes in place, but you can't change the entire system in one go. You can't change the entire process of DAP as such. So therefore, what has been done is there has been some fast lanes which have been created within this overall slow process. And these fast lanes are in terms of IDEX, TDF.
Right.
And also, now if we look at the draft DAP 26, a very good provision which is coming up in that is LCCA, the low cost capital acquisition, which is even much faster than the IDEX also. And actually looking at a higher TRL level of 6 and above, wherein within just about 4 months of AON, demo-based ORs, thereafter take the AON, within 4 months contract, delivery within 9 months, up to 75 or 100 odd crores, up to about 100 odd crores, is what for each project we can take it up.
That's fantastic.
So that is another good thing which has happened. And but now let's look at the functional level. While those are at the higher level, the functional level, the whole process, because any procurement file passes through tens of desks, actually, in various directorates, starting right from the G1 to the DG, and like that. So what is required in that is, the mindset change. So we need to take the ownership firstly. Wherever there is an ownership by the directorate, by the concerned people in the chain, those cases progress faster. Wherever the ownership is not there, they generally tend to linger on. So ownership is very important. And when I say ownership, everybody in the process has to think of the question, which is, today generally the question is, what if this technology or the development project fails? I think we need to change this from this to that what if this technology or capability is available with the adversary before we can deploy it? If he deploys it before we can deploy it. If that is the mindset, then automatically that ownership and that urgency will come in our entire processes. The second thing is of also, I would say, looking at the accountability in the entire process. While we have laid down those timelines in DAP and all, but finally, is anybody accountable for any delays taking place, especially in the decision making? At every stage, right from RFI, RFP to say TEC, trials, everywhere. Because of some imponderables come up, some complications take place in a procurement case, and because of which there are decision delays. But can we really afford to have that kind of decision delays today? I think again, if at the functional level, right from the beginning, if it is highlighted that the cost of that decision delay, it will be very good, so that the decision makers are also perforce forced to take the decisions faster. And so for that to happen is that accountability aspect. In fact, I'm just reminded of an article I saw by one of the industry person only on this aspect of accountability of these decision delays, wherein he mentioned that each day of delay in decision making is actually accountable in terms of cost of the project. Absolutely. Because invariably, finally, when what was supposed to happen within 1.5 to 2 years, if it is happening after 4 years, that must increase in the cost. Now, who is bearing that cost? Finally, it's us, it's the government which is bearing the cost. So that was one model which he had proposed in that. I think I'm reminded of it. Maybe something of that in a modified version, so that people are made accountable for those delays in it. And I'll say apart from this, the urgency is finally, it is also the trust amongst everyone in the entire chain. And that only comes right from the top leadership. Moment the top leadership guides it that way, that we have to do it. And how does that come in? That comes in, I'll say, with respect, if you have some sort of that, actually the required competency. Competency in what way? Not about knowing the procedures alone. Competency is seeing that what the stipulations are, but more than that, what are the provisions which it is getting enabled. So therefore, we need to look at beyond stipulations and see that whatever is not a stipulation is actually a provision, and then try to utilize that in the entire process. We get bound, generally because the way we are brought up, especially from the unit level, we are more bound to standard operating procedures and all. So similarly, people even at the later stages also keep looking at from that fixed mindset of going through only that and look at the stipulations rather than looking at the provisions. If we look at this only the stipulations from the perspective of provisions, then automatically we find rather many ways of doing it, and the decision making will also be that much faster. I think these are some of the ways how that urgency can be actually brought into the whole process.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Third.
Yeah, a quick response on how do we prevent innovation from becoming fragmented islands?
Yeah. Okay. That's again a very good question, because we saw this thing happening, especially let's say in IDEX. Similar kind of project getting developed by different services,
yes,
or even a DPSU, and maybe in some cases by the same developing agency. So once we found that, now what is happening is that before launch of any of these IDEX projects, that entire thing of one service is being shared with all other services, so that there is no duplicacy taking place. Accordingly, we see that if we have any similar project taking already undergoing, or there are two coming up simultaneously and only one of us takes it, or we harmonize it. So that is one aspect of it. But the second most important aspect is, I'll go a little beyond innovation also, say into the R&D part of it. Because again, there are multiple agencies doing R&D, and at times on the same kind of thing, while multiple agencies need to do R&D also, because we don't know who will succeed and who will not. So therefore, accordingly, in some cases, it is, yes, very much preferred that we follow parallel approach. But again, it has to be in a harmonized manner.
yes.
And for this, I'll say that, one of the recommendations of the DRDO review committee was very good. That was about splitting the present appointment of chairman DRDO and secretary DD R&D, which are both being held by one incumbent only. These two to be split, and this so that one remains only chairman DRDO, other one is secretary DD R&D, to whom they propose as secretary DSTI, Defense Science Technology and Innovation. And actually, that's a very good thing. If he is there, he is the one who can harmonize amongst all these IDEX cases, amongst the entire R&D taking place between DRDO and between other, let's say, CSIR labs, or by the Department of Science and Technology, or any other agencies, by the space and all that. So I think that is something which is very much required. If this appointment of Secretary DSTI comes in, he'll be able to harmonize this entire thing. And also, he was supposed to act as as a secretary of the National Technology Council.
Okay.
So I think if that comes in, that will again facilitate, there's a harmonization in this entire R&D process.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. We'll move to the industry now. My first question is to Mr. Godse. What does deterrence look like in cyberspace, where attrition itself, or rather attribution itself, is contested?
Yeah, so thank you being part of this very important conversation and discussion. And so when we say there are two parts of that. One is deterrence, but there is resiliency as well, right? Because nowadays we focus more of our attention to become resilient, because no matter what you plan, what you work, what you build capability, still thing could go wrong, because we are learning that with different way current example is this Mythos class model which is coming in. So until now we had been talking about security by design, or we are talking about so many different kind of capabilities that we will need to make sure that we are defending and we are responding better. But there's one small experience that we had done in Data Security Council of India. There's one application we develop in such a way that the 7 different challenges or vulnerabilities will be there in the application basically. And we tested with some of the available models, and we found almost 78 different ways same application can be exploited basically, right? So this capability of the model of long horizon or long range context correlation is now helping them to identify a problem which is there for last 27 years of time basically, and identify in such a volume and speed. So one part of is your ability to identify the vulnerability and number of vulnerabilities. Other part is that aiding that workflows basically, which will help you to exploit those vulnerability quite quickly, quite fast basically, right? So in that case, what kind of hygiene that you need for such kind of ecosystem and this kind of advancement that we are seeing in model, and this trajectory of AI capability, if you closely look at somebody which is in AI, they will not get surprised what Mythos class models are doing. But that is current challenge. But same effort that is being put together in terms of compete, in terms of model and different investment, almost $3 trillion being invested. You can just imagine what will happen in next 6 months, what will happen in next 12 months, what will happen next 3 months of time, basically.
Right.
If you look at those trajectories and look at those capabilities, so at the Geopolitics Council of India, we try to look at 16 different parameters against which the AI is advancing, basically, right? And every 6 months, and almost now every month now new model is coming, basically.
Correct.
And they're already talking about the continuous training, every day, daily training of a model, and they are increasingly focusing on inference compute, and that's becoming big area.
Yeah.
And because of that, we'll see the for world we build security, right? That world doesn't exist. The current model which has been built for the world, that model, the world doesn't exist now, basically.
Right.
So in this case, so one part is how you deter, basically. So one important lesson we are getting is the collapsing all possible attack surfaces, basically, right? And there are a lot of things we still think that it's very complex for attacker to get hold of the footprint and attack you, basically, right? But now that's not possibility. So whatever available for elite class attacker or elite class organization, for example, Google and Microsoft used to pay millions of dollars to find vulnerability in their product, basically. So now same capabilities available by just paying $20 per month kind of thing, right? When situation comes to like this, basically, then you need to make sure that every possible attack surface is collapsing, and you yourself has to collapse. That's one important part, right? Second important lesson is the not allowing me. We still have to assume things will still go wrong with us. This asymmetry of we depending millions out of million, where attacker has to success 1 out of million for that matter. This asymmetry we have to understand. So then in that case, we have to assume that things will still go wrong with us. But then how do you not allow the lateral movement? For example, they may get into one system, but if you not allow it to progress within the network, basically, right? So how do you segment your network much better, basically? So that becomes very important area of deliberation, and we are doing a lot of progress in that. Third important deterrence part is the deception, and this is a very important military term, but now we are using increasingly in a cyber context, because now deception technology will become so significant in coming future, basically, because you need to understand the attack paths and variations of attack paths. For example, let's say until now there was attack surface management that we've been talking about, but now we are increasingly talking about attack path management. So there are millions possibility that could probably enter, that will help attacker to enter in the organization ecosystem. I talked about AI is helping them. There's a massive parallel execution capability of AI. So if you found one way to enter, AI will help you thousands other way. So there's a variant that we talk about now. So until now, developing variant was very difficult task, but AI is becoming so better in terms of coding. So variant is becoming a big challenge for us. So how do you make sure that this attack path is managed better? They are continuous in terms of understanding what is going wrong. And increasingly, we are even talking about creating entire digital twin for cybersecurity. So those are things which is coming in, but deception, technology, and systems will become very significant in coming forward, basically, right? And then in all of these effort, responding better is very important. And that response is unfortunately in some systems of IT is better, because the patching velocity is now getting challenged too much. Microsoft released 163 patches in month of April. This is a until now this doesn't happen like this, basically, right? This volume of patches, volume of vulnerabilities that will be and patches will be coming. So IT systems will be still better, but when it comes to, for example, telecom system, or comes to power system for that matter, comes to systems which are not really very evolved kind of the way the Microsoft is evolved, basically, there the patching velocity will become very significant. And how do you make sure that velocity has been addressed? So all of these, and then how do you there's a adversarial attacker adversarial reasoning. So we, rather than somebody else is breaking, you need to break yourself. So for example, we develop this sandbox environment in DSA, and we are helping most organizations build their own sandbox environment to check your code against the AI. So the kind of a resiliency that we talk about against the frontier model, for that matter, and the frontier model and the open source model with China, there is one which came last week. We are really getting worried about that, basically. While we are worried about Mythos, but we are more worried about what Queen can do, what Kimi can do, for that matter, basically, right? So getting your code tested in a sandbox environment is another important deterrence, basically, right? So you know what is happening, how your codes have been built. So all of this now elevates the entire hygiene, deterrence, and response or resiliency to the next level, right? And that's what we see happening in cybersecurity space.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Godse. I'll now cut the queue and move to Commander Kundra. Question for you, sir, is what prevents niche technologies from scaling rapidly into deployable military capability, in your opinion? And how difficult is it for startups to translate battlefield requirements into viable products, given the speed of adaptability required today?
Right, ma'am. So you're asking what stops it?
Yeah. What prevents niche technologies? I mean, there are challenges.
Yeah. So, ma'am, I'll put it like this, that, you know, when we talk about niche technologies, I think this is not a very new word. We knew that there are niche technologies. The only thing is they always remained a footnote till very recently. The niche technologies never made it to headlines because, you know, we had a belief, I was in the Navy, so we had a belief that as long as, you know, system by and large is functioning, so whatever is considered niche, and why they're niche actually, they're not niche because, you know, they are unimportant. They are niche because they're very difficult to master. So we relegated them into niche technology, and we said, okay, as long as, you know, any particular platform is, you know, functioning, probably the so-called vulnerabilities, because we don't own the niche technologies, will somehow get, you know, accounted in that whole thing. Now that entire perception has sort of changed now. You know, I'm glad that I had, you know, brief interaction with General Mann, in which they are saying that, you know, they are going to take out challenges now, which is not talking about a product, but a stack which is a niche stack. So it's glad this is happening, because, you know, what we have seen is that those niche technologies, you know, which we were ignoring for whatsoever reason, has become the focal point now. And coming to, you know, why, what's the startup's role in that? I think startups are very well placed to, you know, work around niche technologies. And I'll tell you, and a lot of things which have, you know, from the defense forces and from the government side, a lot of ground has been this thing. The only problem is that when you start working on niche technology, first of all, it's not very glamorous, right? If I tell you that I am working on a DC to DC converter, which will convert certain voltage into certain voltage, the first question you know, which comes to somebody's mind is, what is ultimately is going to do, right? So it's very difficult to go and pitch these ideas of niche technologies without having to, you know, sort of relate it to a concrete product or a project. So that is one of the challenge. And a lot of challenges which we see, you know, which I also face, is that there's a lot of, you know, concept selling you have to do in that. because at the end of the day, you are trying to tell somebody that, okay, this is the vision, and if we make this so-called niche technology, it will result into, a definite gain going forward. But sometimes it sort of becomes difficult, because how we work on performance, we work on parameters, there is some standard things and all. So it requires a certain out of the box thinking on part of the startups, and also sort of out of box thinking in case of the customers, which in this case majorly are the defense forces. But I believe that the ecosystem we are in, I think we are very well placed, because if the services are looking for niche technologies, and I'm really amazed at the understanding of of the senior officers they have on niche technologies. I had people coming into my stall and such pertinent questions were asked. I think that's something which is going to keep us on foot, and is going to motivate us to sort of just expose what we know and what we don't know, and be very transparent about it, and say that it may not be some shaking experiment we are going to do. We are producing these technology, and this is going to this thing. So I think it's great for startup because outlay is less. You can start from paper. You can go onto computer. You can build few electronics. You can make a small lab, and I think one can do wonderful work. So very, very excited about this, and I think have I answered the question, ma'am?
You have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. My question would be to Major Vineet. What happens when misinformation, cyber attacks, and economic coercion are synchronized during a crisis? Okay. I know you had Cyber Peace Foundation, but we are in an age of more crisis, less peace. So if you can answer that, and could my corollary to that is, could future wars be won by shaping public perception before actual military engagements?
Right. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, Claus, for having me here. It's a great opportunity to meet so many people, like-minded people, all the industry veterans and people from the army, academia, and everywhere. At Cyberpeace, ma'am, we are a global non-profit headquartered in India, and we are right now in a year which we say it's a year of disruption. 2026, and what Vinayak just said, he mentioned about mythos, Claude mythos. This has changed the world. And the future warfare, what we see, is going to be AI versus AI. One side of it would be offensive, the other side would be defensive. That's how things are happening. We are moving from ANI, now we are in agentic AI. At some time, a point of time, we'll move to artificial general intelligence and probably super intelligence. That's how the world is kind of moving on. And what worries me at large is the society on the ground, people on the ground, and those who are consuming content on an everyday basis, consuming content from places that they don't even know that whether on the other side it's a man or a machine. Is it in a particular territory like India, or it's being planted by our adversaries who are in other places? With agentic AI now, there are campaigns that can be created within seconds. Within seconds, that means you don't need a complete kind of a war room to be set up now. You just need one or two smart chaps to be there. And they are the ones who can create a campaign, and they are the one who can plant the campaign. And it spreads like a wildfire. And that's how perceptions are getting managed. And this is what we saw during Op Sindoor also. It's not just the platform that we use here in India. I'll not talk about X, Meta, and others, but the platforms which are banned in India. A lot of misinformation, disinformation campaign where AI, artificial intelligence, and deepfakes were being used to kind of manipulate a lot of mindset there. So this remains a big challenge, and the challenge will keep on escalating now. And that is where, in fact, again, bringing back the conversation to, again, how the agentic era is shaping is Claude mythos. It's going to be a challenge. And a lot of, I would say, industry and entities and cybersecurity companies, associations, even civil society organizations are right now studying it in detail. And a couple of weeks ago, Palo Alto Networks, they have a Unit 42 section. They released a very detailed report on how the world is going to move. Traditional security way, like we used to talk, and what Vinayak just mentioned, the models are extremely impressive now. I remember the day when I started my career as a hacker way back in 2006, and I remember, in fact, my session in 2006 started in 1998, but 2006 when I was at College of Military Engineering, Pune, I was demonstrating a live hack on how systems could be exploited, and it used to be man behind the attack, compromising or hacking a phone or hacking a machine. Now, in the complex era that we live today, and if you maybe head to your home today, if you start mapping your digital devices, you will see that on an average of 15 to 20 digital devices that you're using daily, and they're all connected. And these all devices can be weaponized without a human behind. It's the agent which actually detects the bugs. And the bugs, like, again, as was mentioned, that Microsoft had to release so many kind of patches. Now, these patches, there was a bug that existed in Mozilla Firefox for almost around 20 years, which nobody noticed. Best of the tools didn't notice. Best of the human didn't notice. And all of that, now, today, it's possible. I said there's a lot of good side of it, but then I'm going to talk more on the negative side because it's going to impact the society at large. And this is where we have to be prepared. We have to be resilient. And when we talk about, and I'll talk about the theme of the seminar here, security to prosperity, I think it's time that we need to crowdsource the entire movement. So we need to crowdsource security and we need to crowdsource prosperity also. Why crowdsource? Because we need to have first responder on the ground. We need to have people who understand what kind of content they're consuming. They can identify the difference between what is a synthetic content and what is a natural content. So things of this kind needs to be done at large, and this is where I think the entire ecosystem, because governments cannot do it alone. It's why if we say that the entire responsibility lies with the government, it's something wrong on our part. It has to be government, industry, academia, and this is where civil society like us also have a role, and like DSCI is playing a role. We are all civil society organized. We are playing a role here. So industry, academia, civil society, government, and the user at large, the user base at large. When we talk about information warfare, it is dependent on the user. If we have well-aware users, this is how, in fact, we can counter those narratives. The other thing is, ma'am, in fact, the hotspots that are coming up, it's also surprising for us. Everybody, I'm sure, must have seen the famous Netflix series called Jamtara. I come from that state, by the way. I come from Jharkhand, from the state. The state got popular because of Mahendra Singh Dhoni and the other thing, Jamtara. But the thing is, there are many hotspots like Jamtara, which is now coming up across the country. And there are influence from our adversaries. That means there are campaigns being run, there's specific funding that is coming, and the entire ecosystem is kind of coming so that they can create those content and they can create this communal violence, communal unrest, and all these things are happening. So this is where, ma'am, I think we need to be resilient as a nation. Technology resilience is utmost important. The other thing is talent also, and the other speakers have said also, I'll not elaborate much, but one point that we saw when we were partnering with Indian Army during the the Indian Army Cyber Quest, it was surprising to see around in one hackathon, 6,300 plus entries coming in, and there were talents all around. And most of the best of the talent is coming from smaller towns, tier 3 cities, and institutions probably you have not even heard of. So our mentality now has to change, and we need to think beyond IITs. We need to see how we can tap the talent that are lying in smaller towns and where people are very passionate, but what they don't have is a platform. And a platform like the Indian Army Cyber Quest and the Indian Army internship program, I think these are the best kind of platform that are coming up, which is giving a lot of kind of platform to people. It can create a cohort of these people who can be the cyber ambassadors to the nation. In times of need, when these large campaigns are being targeted towards us, they can be the first responders. Secondly, they can also address the huge skill gap that exists globally, nationally. There are a lot of intelligence here because we interact with I4C, we interact with the National Cyber Coordinator's Office. There's a lot of these kind of new and emerging areas that are coming up which people are not aware of. So how can we actually kind of fill the gap is, again, something that we need to strategize, and we need to start moving fast because the machines are here. It's just a matter of time. The entire operations are going to be scaled. Palo Alto Networks has already predicted, earlier it was 6 months timeline that was being predicted that this technology will get into the hands of bad actors. Now they're saying it's just 3 months. So the runway is short and we need to be very fast and quick in action.
Yeah, well, I know, scary, but that's the reality. My question now is for Mr. Nilesh Dande. Nilesh, I understand 42 Labs is one of those few companies in India that is actually working on quantum-related solutions. You also work on data protection, API security. If you had to propose a simple strategic doctrine or a framework, keeping in mind futuristic emerging technologies, quantum-based, AI-based, how do you think India should prepare itself for the next generation of tech warfare?
Thank you. And honored to be here amongst all of the panelists. And I think these guys have kind of a set a foundation for me already. And so I was basically thinking, so Vinayak sir, Major, they have actually mentioned about what are the imminent threats and what can be done. What I was thinking is there an alternative way of thinking about the whole thing, right? Now, before I jump in there, just for the uninitiated, right? The mythos, are we all guys aware about what is mythos? The show of hands? Okay, okay, only few hands. Okay, mythos is a new AI model. Typically, when you do an hacking, there are two type of skill sets, right? There is a one guy who says, I will try to find out where is the open door, right? And there is another guy who says that how I can actually make an entry through the open door, right? So that is called as an exploitation. Now, mythos is the model which basically have proven that it can find multiple of open doors in your digital ecosystem and is able to exfiltrate inside those open doors. As simple as that. Second question, an extremely important one. As on date today, who has an access to mythos? Any guesses?
Go ahead.
Okay. So they basically have said there are only 40 companies in the world. Okay. Predominantly, these are basically residing onto the US soil. And most importantly, the US Department of Defense. Right? So US Department of Defense today actually has an access to mythos. I also had a conversation with one of the systemically important bank in India, which were worried, right? Systemically important bank is the national critical infrastructure, saying if basically goes down, what will happen? And they requested. So by the way, these guys, the Cloud only have 3 employees in India. They access this. And they said, why cannot we have in the sandbox environment so that we can test it out? Outrightly denied. Okay, it was denied. Okay. So that kind of raises the question. Raises the question of, and even if you look at the last panel that we have had, right, before this, we were basically thinking about the sovereignty in so many areas. Okay. But this is actually the most critical area now, right? Where the wars, as on date today, are we at war? Yes, we are at war. There are 1.7 million attacks that are happening right now at this moment, every minute that is happening. So this is a war, right? This is information warfare that is already going on. So the natural question for everybody is, shouldn't there be a sovereignty into the information domain as well? Okay. So what I'm going to try to define is basically a sovereign digital trust platform. Okay. And I think that is the need of an hour, the sovereign digital trust platform, which our guys are able to use. Our national critical infrastructure, our defense is able to use for both for offense as well as a defense. Okay. Now, and there are 2 critical technologies that we can keep on hearing, right? Which is going to do great things for humanity, but it is going to do a bad things of humanity.
Absolutely.
Which we have basically discussed one technology, which is an AI. And the second technology is a quantum part of it. Okay. The National Quantum Mission has done great things, but we can do greater things as compared to that. Okay. So I will not talk about AI. I think it is, you guys have understood now from the sovereignty perspective, it is extremely critical to have our own sovereign model. And see, people always basically ask me a question saying, Nilesh, if we start now, when will we arrive at that level? But if you don't start now, you will never arrive.
Never arrive.
Right? So that's the thing. So having a sovereign AI is extremely critical. Having those skill set inside is extremely critical, and having those investment is also extremely critical. The second part, as far as the quantum is concerned, see, there is a second data point, and I will draw this line back from the medieval times, right? The countries which have done well, okay, in order to protect their sovereignty, are the countries who have actually excelled in cryptography. Okay, again, for the uninitiated, what is cryptography? It is encoding, right? You just make that data garbled. Started with Caesar, Julius Caesar. That's why we call it Caesar cipher. World War II, right? We had an Enigma machine which friendly nation captured. Subsequent to that, one-time pads which were captured by US, one-time pads were basically getting used by Russia. Now, imagine if there is a quantum computer which is existing already and not there in the public domain. Who is your savior? Okay, that is where the post-quantum and the technologies which will basically protect you from the quantum computer, okay, those needs to exist. And what is the timeline for that? This is not impending. This is not, see, quantum, the harvest now decrypt, I think you guys might have heard about several conversations right now, but that is a real thing. The state secrets, they are long-lived secrets that are there, okay? And so the preparation actually has to begin today, okay? And why this preparation is so critical? See, another one is, if you need to change the cryptography, it is like changing the wires that are there within this room without disrupting this program that is going on there. And that is basically called as a migration journey part of it. Okay. So combining these two technologies to build a national sovereign digital trust infrastructure is extremely critical, and that is the need of the hour that is there. And that's what we are actually making an attempt to that under the leadership of Vinayak sir, okay, and he's guided us well to actually come out with our own indigenous cryptography algorithms to protect our nation's assets.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have one industry member who's not on stage, but I'd like to ask him this question, and he represents CAS. There are lines of shift in weapons export policy, and I know you're working a lot on that, especially for India from Germany and EU. RM's visit is happening right now. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you see this moving ahead? Can we have a mic there, please?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, the RM was in Berlin a few days ago, and the conversations he had with his counterpart, Minister Pistorius, particularly have brought out a very interesting change, particularly also in terms of niche technologies, where we're actually going past the phase where we're talking about a buyer-seller dynamic. We're talking about co-production as well as co-development. This kind of stems out, from the fact that in 2024, there was a paper by the German cabinet where in the Indo-Pacific strategy, they've particularly highlighted how India sits as a really important player in the way the security architecture of the world is shifting throughout all these times. And this year has just taken all of this on complete steroids, where we're seeing disruptions of so many kinds. And this visit has really, really brought in both the countries together, where this has become a place where it's a conversation starter, but both countries have come up to an understanding that the possibilities are endless. And going past niche technologies alone, with other ventures that we're working on, for example, the Shishumar class submarines, they're getting an upgrade already, and TKMS is really cooperating. Under P-75I, the future air independent propulsion system submarines, we're also working on that, and maybe this agreement will materialize within this year itself. Earlier, there was a time when Germany and India were cooperating a lot, but then there was this cold period, as you highlighted. And now Germany is going past that because we recognize how things are changing. The problems that we had earlier and the problems we have today, they're completely different. And the way we have to collaborate together and work on it is also something we have to really think out of the box completely.
Thank you. We are at the end, yes. So I am just going to close this with 3 or 4 rapid fire for the entire panel, and you can decide what answers you want to give. One vulnerability India is underestimating at this point. Anyone? And we are open to multiple answers.
I think the vulnerability, particularly when you talk about technology, I think this idea that the technology will be weaponized is fine, but I think the most important idea is that anybody who's worked for 20, 30 years of technology, even if you pay him, hefty sum, the forward edge of technology will not be transferred. So let's take it that way, that the forward edge of technology will remain under denial.